So there's still about 0.5 millimetre of pull on the trigger. That's just enough to make it safe, I think. It results in an overall trigger movement of about 2 mil to actually fire it. Can you see how this is the old trigger mech, by the way. Look at this pin moving. That's how worn this trigger mech is. The holes in the mech itself have that much play on. It's the same for the hammer. This one here is the hammer pivot pin. Look at that. If I wiggle that around, there's not a lot. There's nothing I can do about this. This is a really old trigger mech that's seen thousands of rounds. If we move to here, you can see I've drilled a peephole in the trigger. So when I press the hammer down, if I press the hammer down, you can see the disconnector there. So when I pull the trigger, if I keep the trigger pulled, when the hammer resets, that allows the bolt to reset the hammer even though the trigger is still being held down. And then when I release the trigger, oh, a bit sticky, oh dear, that's a bad example. Hold it down, there we go. You see, when you release the trigger after the hammer's reset, it recatches where it should do. It's just a bit sticky. I've just greased it. I've literally just reassembled this, but you can see how much play there is in those pinholes for a trigger mech on a gun. There's only so much I can do with this. So if we swap to the newer trigger mech, this one, I need a bit of camera angle. This hasn't got any inspection holes. Oops. And I could tell this mech's newer because, for one thing, I'm wiggling the trigger there. Oh, come on, focus. There we go. I'm wiggling the trigger there. You can see there's very little movement, if anything, on that trigger pivot pin, this one here. And for the hammer, if I wiggle the hammer, okay, you can see the pin moving a bit, but it's nowhere near as bad as the older trigger mech. And this one just overall feels like a more solid trigger mech because it's newer. It's a very solid action. If I get the trigger to the right place, we'll see about the movement here. Everything's a little bit sticky because it's new, but so I could maybe extend that over travel screw slightly. If you watch, it fires about there, so I could probably get another 0.5 mil out of the reset on that trigger. Not bad. If you actually look at, where's my spike? Oop. If you look at the bottom of the trigger here, watch how much it actually moves for a shot. We're only talking about 2 mil. I could maybe reduce the over travel slightly, but this one sticks a little bit sometimes. Like sometimes if you hold the trigger down and reset it and then release it, the first time you pull the trigger, sometimes it doesn't shoot. 90% of the times it does though, but I think that's just because the parts are new. I think once they're bedded in it'll be fine. But yeah, that's just an example I was showing you of the comparison between an old trigger mech. If you look at the trigger pivot pin, there's almost no play there on the newer one, and then this is the older one. If you look at the pin there, you can see there's fucking loads of movement, and I think the design for these trigger parts is as tolerant as I can make it for the age of parts. This one still has pretty good, like if you look at the movement, still got roughly the same trigger pull, even though I've had to sand the disconnector a bit in here. Not sand, I've got this is ideal for it because it still has to be a sharp corner. This is a very small square diamond file, which is perfect for sanding the hook on the disconnector in there. That little hook there that you can see, that's catching under the bottom edge of the trigger sear, and it gets reset when the hammer goes back. Oops. It's alright, the twang noise you can hear, the hammer spring on the top here jumps out of place because this particular trigger mech's just using a cut down 150% spring. So when you pull the trigger, if you watch, the hammer is actually jumped out of position. It just makes a twang sound when it pops back in. That wouldn't happen normally, it's just because there's nothing stopping the bolt overextending forwards. Normally that'd hit the back, not the bolt, the hammer overextending forwards. Normally that wouldn't happen because it'd be hitting the bolt. But yeah, so when I cock this, you can see the sear resetting nicely in there. It's beautiful, and we can see both parts moving. So when the hammer goes fully back, the disconnector's off, the sear's not riding on the hammer, and then the hammer goes to the set position, the disconnector re-engages, the sear is cocked, so now when you pull the trigger, that does that, and then the hammer goes down, disconnect, releases the sear, catches the hammer, trigger resets, and you're good to go again. Very nice, very nice. Feels like a proper trigger now. Doesn't feel like a cap gun anymore.